couple of paragraphs from, where's the camera there? A couple of paragraphs from the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson, from the back of the book, is an extremely gifted attorney. And he was very young when he founded the Equal Justice Initiative, a legal practice dedicated to defending the poor, to those who ended up in prison for very long times for no other reason than they did not have good legal care. That work transformed his understanding of mercy and justice. And so I read. After so many months, really just over a year, it seemed like we were truly close to success. It seemed like the judge would really rule in favor of my two clients. That ruling, if it went in their favor, would immediately release them from their prison sentence. Finally, we sat holding our breath. And when the judge ruled in our favor, the people in the courtroom did something I had never seen before. They erupted in applause. Defense lawyers, prosecutors, family members, deputies, sheriffs, all applauded. Even the inmates in the courtroom with their hands handcuffed applauded. Exhausted, I wandered the halls of the courthouse while we waited for one more piece of paper, always one more piece of paper, to be faxed and approved to clear the way for the release of Mr. Caston and Mr. Carter. I noticed an older Black woman who sat on the marble steps in the massive courthouse hallway. She looked tired and worn. She was wearing a hat that my sister liked to refer to as a church meeting hat. I see one today. I see one church meeting hat today. She had smooth, dark skin, and I recognized her as someone who had been in the courtroom when Mr. Carter was resentenced. In fact, I thought I'd seen her every time I'd come to the courtroom in New Orleans. I assumed that she was related or connected to one of the clients, although I don't remember the other family members ever mentioning her. And when I walked over, she smiled at me. I'm tired, and I'm not gonna get up, so you're gonna have to lean over for me to give you a hug. I smiled back at her. Well, yes, ma'am. I love hugs, thank you. And as I leaned over, she wrapped her arms around the neck and then patted the stairs right next to her and said, "Sit. I want to talk to you." I sat on the steps beside her, and I said, "Are you related to Mr. Casson or Mr. Carter?" I asked. "Oh, no. I'm not related to anybody here." Not that I know of, anyway. She had a kind smile and looked at me intently. "I just come here to help people. This place is full of pain, so people need plenty of help around here." "Well, that's really kind of you, ma'am." "Oh, no, It's what I'm supposed to do. This is what I do. My 16-year-old grandson was murdered 15 years ago. I love that boy more than life itself. He was killed by some other boys, and I started coming to the courtroom then for the first time for their trials. I sat in there and cried every day for nearly 2 weeks. None of it made sense. Those boys were found guilty for killing my grandson, and the judge sent them to prison forever. I thought it would make me feel better. Actually, made me feel worse. I sat in that courtroom after they were sentenced and cried and cried and cried, and a lady came over and gave me a hug. She asked me if the boys who were sentenced were my children, and I said, no. And I told her that they were the boys who had killed my child. She hesitated, but didn't say a word, and she just sat down and stayed with me for almost 2 hours. About a year later, I started coming here. I really don't know why. I guess I just felt like maybe I could be that someone for someone else, someone who someone hurting could lean on. I don't know if it was my pain or not. I just decided I was supposed to be here to catch some of the stones that people hurl at each other. Good morning again. I so clearly remember my last visit with all of you in late November. I remember at that time that I shared from Trevor Noah's book, Into the Uncut Grass. And I talked about the importance of not isolating, but of hanging together when we find ourselves in the painful, confusing weeds and uncut grass of life. To be honest, on that November Sunday, just 5 short months ago, I truly never imagined that the national weeds would get so high. Yesterday, as many of you mentioned during our prayer time, was a beautiful example of millions of Americans standing together in those weeds, refusing to isolate, standing together shoulder to shoulder. Now there is, as many of you are aware, a legal as well as professional restraint on clergy to refrain from bringing politics into the pulpit. I've been known on occasion to leave the pulpit and walk down there when I really had something I had to say. There is more, but to be honest, today we do not need to hear more politics. There is more than enough to read and hear beyond these walls. We are gathered today as a faith community of seekers. You called me to lead this service today, to share a word of hope and direction. At least that's my understanding of the invitation. And I hope I don't disappoint you. My inspiration for today's word of hope is drawn from another clergywoman who well understood the responsibility and constraint of standing in a pulpit. Today is not about political movements It is about pondering mercy. And so we begin our journey this morning on a cold January morning in Washington, D.C., on the morning after the presidential inauguration, to be specific. It has been a tradition since 1933 to hold a service of prayer in our beautiful National Cathedral. It is a solemn affair attended by the new president, his administration, and family. And after the pomp and promises of Inauguration Day, this service is a moment of pause for the country and its new leadership. Now, for most of us, those services are not particularly memorable, unless, of course, you're on the cathedral staff. I doubt anyone, I know I don't, remembers a single word, hymn, or reading from any of those services that occur or have occurred every 4 years since 1933. Now, having said that, if I were the betting sort, I would bet that few people will forget the words chosen by this year's preacher, Episcopal Bishop, the Right Reverend Marianne Budd. Bishop Budd said, and I quote, "Mr. President, you have felt the hand of a loving God. I ask you to have mercy. Have mercy on those in our country who are scared." It had been a gentle sermon focused on national unity. Her plea for mercy, shockingly to me, evoked a firestorm of death threats and actual calls for her deportation. It would seem that mercy is not a very popular or understood word. When I heard Marianne, I had just finished reading Brian Stevenson's book, from which I just shared a segment for all of you. And as I listened to Reverend Budd, I witnessed in the flesh Stevenson's metaphor of a stonecatcher come to life. Recognized how Marianne had used her moment in the pulpit to be an active stonecatcher, to intentionally and consciously place herself between the vulnerable ones and the powerful ones. She stood to catch the stones that had been aimed at the migrants falsely accused of being criminals. She stood to catch the stones aimed at those in the education system accused of harming our children by supporting DEI and LGBT rights. She stood on that cold January morning to ask the stone throwers to pause. Simply to pause, to reconsider, to show mercy to so many who were terribly frightened. Her simple plea, spoken on behalf of others, truly did ignite a firestorm of rage and disgust, a barrage of newly and freshly cast stones. However, I am happy to say truly that Marianne had modeled the courage to catch stones, and others quickly followed her discussion, her suggestion, her example. and others rallied. Bundy's model lays out for all of us a way forward. We do not need a prestigious pulpit. It is an action. The action of catching stones is an action we can all participate in, as well as an action that is increasingly needed.
It should not be said in church, I'm leaving, and never to return. That's okay,
I am sorry, my friends, and this is often what can happen. Even when we are trying to speak of mercy. But I am sorry that I have caused this discomfort among and in a member of your community. So with your permission, I will continue. This is an action, this action of learning how to be a stonecatcher that we can all participate in and is much needed in this year of 2025. So mercy. What was the man's name who left? I wish he had heard this part. Mercy. Mercy is an old word. For some, perhaps an outdated word. It is a word that is usually only heard in the context of traditional Christian prayers or in a lawyer's plea before a judge. However, it is used from the most ancient to modern. A petition for mercy is directed toward the one who has the power to grant the request. A petition for mercy is directed toward the one who has the power to grant the request. Either a verbal request, as the lawyer asking a judge for clemency, or a nonverbal request, as one whose heart notices that a fellow human being is struggling. From the story of the Good Samaritan who stopped to respond to an obvious need, to the stories found in the Harry Potter series, to the human stories of everyday life, we are reminded that the power to extend mercy lies within each and every one of us. Our privilege gives us the power to extend mercy. And we don't need to look far. Each and every one of us on a daily basis has the ability to practice being a stonecatcher, the one who stands between the thrower and the target, the one who runs interference on behalf of another, the one who holds out their arm to deflect the pain of another. In his book, Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson muses on Jesus' advice to a rowdy, mean-spirited crowd, which you heard in our opening choir anthem this morning. Jesus tells the crowd that only those who have never broken a law should feel free to throw a stone. In that story, everyone drops their stone and walks away. I'm not so sure it was a human crowd. But at any rate, life surely seems much more complicated today. Stone throwers, even Christian and other religious stone throwers, find it all too easy to rationalize their own righteousness, good judgment, and perfection. Some stone throwers tell themselves and each other a very common cover story. I'm just following the law. I'm just following my leader. I'm just following my scriptures. Now, I can understand, and I'm sure we all can, that stone throwers are often compelled to hurl that stone because of their own fear and anger. But as Stevenson writes, fear and anger can infect an entire community, a state, a nation, and make us blind, irrational, and dangerous. The good news? Courage is just as infectious. Courage is just as infectious and can infect a community, a state, or a nation with wisdom, compassion, and mercy. We have come to the point in our lives when it is simply not enough to encourage the stone throwers to stop throwing stones. We, each and every one of us, must choose, as did Bishop Budd, to stand between the stone thrower and the targeted one. We must stand to catch the stones that do get thrown, to catch the stones intended to inflict pain. As stone catchers, we become active agents of mercy as we wait for the changes we whisper in our prayers. Bishop Budd embodied the behavior that Stevenson challenges each and every one of us to consider. It's not an easy path. It's not a path that comes with assurances that we will not be harmed in the process. It is risky behavior. Stevenson writes, being a stone catcher means being willing to stand up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable. It means being willing to ask people to think before they act and to walk away. So how might those of us drawn to conscious spiritual living, conscious spiritual seeking, practice stone catching in a way that places us in front of and at the side of those who are unfairly targeted? How might we, in matters large and small, share mercy with intention? How might we support each other to act with mercy and courage, to stand on behalf of those in our communities who are frightened, scared, and beleaguered? It need not be a big thing. You can start small. Wear a pin. Frank, I just happen to have a whole bunch. Will you show them? Thank you. I have a whole bunch, and at the end of the service, you're welcome to take one. Or Frank, you can pass them out. Learning how to be a stone catcher starts with a small step. Wear this pin with intention as a reminder to you and others that you will stand up for them. You can write letters and postcards. You can keep your door closed if ICE comes and asks to speak to the person working in your home. You do not need to open that door. You can sit in the comfort of your home and educate yourself on a variety of policies and then share that new knowledge. One example, it's common to hear the phrase, immigrants are takers. How many of you have heard that? Immigrants do nothing but take from us. Do your homework. And the next time you hear that, take a deep breath, calm yourself and say, you know, I recently read that according to the IRS, undocumented workers pay payroll taxes and contribute, hold on to your seat if you haven't heard this statistic before, undocumented workers alone contribute $90.6 billion to the federal budget. This is why the IRS, ever since the IRS came into being, has been the only agency that never had to share its information with any other agency, because no one wanted to lose that $90 billion from our federal budget. And here's one more half of that. Even if that undocumented person becomes documented and eventually becomes a citizen, they are never permitted to claim that money. It's free and clear money. Having facts like that handy can help you to be a Stonecatcher. The kind of Stonecatcher that changes the national narrative. Mercy me. Anybody have a Southern friend? Mercy me is an old Southern statement of exclamation in which mercy is used as a verb. We can bring that statement to life as we seek ways to literally mercy one another. Deciding to be a Stonecatcher, to mercy one another, may well be one of the most important healing and spiritual practices of our time. May it be so.